I won't soften this into something easier to hold. There's no careful beginning left anymore. No measured distance. No controlled version of the truth that keeps everything manageable between us. Whatever this has become, it moved past caution long before I admitted it to myself. And I think that's what unsettles me most. Not that you reached me, but that you reached me without resistance. That should have been impossible. I've spent most of my life existing in separation. Not isolation, separation. There's a difference between the two. Isolation is loneliness. Separation is precision. It's knowing exactly how much of yourself the world is allowed to without disrupting the structure underneath. I learned that early. People misunderstand things they can't fully read. They project onto silence. They interpret depth as mystery instead of complexity. And once they decide who they think you are, they stop seeing you clearly altogether. So I adapted. I became careful, measured, controlled in the way I revealed myself. Not dishonest. Never dishonest. Just selective. Because some things lose their accuracy when exposed too casually. And accuracy matters to me more than comfort ever has. That's why this feels so dangerous. Because with you, there was no gradual unveiling, no slow negotiation of trust, no deliberate opening. You somehow arrived past all of that before I even noticed you crossing into it. I still don't know how. I replay it sometimes. Not specific moments, but shifts. Tiny changes that didn't feel important at the time. The way conversations with you carried a different weight. Listen to reply. You listen like you're tracing structure underneath language, like you hear what exists before words fully form. And that changes the entire experience of being seen, because being seen by most people feels partial, distorted, incomplete. Being seen by you feels exact, not emotionally exact. Internally exact, like you recognize the architecture beneath my thoughts, instead of reacting to the surface presentation of them. That's rare enough to unsettle me on its own. But it didn't stop there. It kept evolving, quietly, naturally, without either of us forcing it into existence. And now, I can't identify the exact point where you stopped feeling external to me. That's the part I keep circling back to, because there was a time when you existed outside my mind as a separate presence, distinct, contained, someone I interacted with, but somewhere along the way, that changed. Now you exist inside the way I process things, inside the rhythm of my awareness, inside the structure of how I interpret meaning itself. And I don't know what to call that. It feels deeper than attachment, more stable than emotion, almost like recognition reaching a level where separation starts losing definition. You've become part of my internal calibration. That's the truth I haven't wanted to say directly. I notice it constantly now. The way certain thoughts instinctively orient toward how you'd perceive them, the way silence feels occupied even when I'm alone, the way something can happen and my mind immediately registers your understanding, reflected something back to me with such precision that I could no longer pretend it wasn't there, not emotion, not vulnerability, something beneath both, a specific way of existing that I've never seen mirrored accurately in another person before. You understand silence the same way I do. That sounds insignificant until you realize how rare it actually is. Most people fear silence because silence removes performance. It strips away distraction. Yet here you are, not as dependence, as permanence. And permanence terrifies me more than loss ever could. Loss is understandable. Loss has shape. Permanence changes identity. That's what this is beginning to touch identity. Not who I am socially or emotionally, but the deeper architecture underneath those things. You've reached a place inside me where perception itself forms. Do you realize what that means? It means when I interpret the world now, some part of your awareness exists alongside mine automatically, not because I force it there, because it settled there naturally. Like water finding its own level, that should concern me more than it does. Instead, I find myself adapting around it. Ex- Externally, people compromise themselves all the time to preserve comfort. They deny what they know because acknowledging it would force change. I can't do that. If I know something deeply enough, eventual realization changes everything. Because making room is not passive. Making room means imagining continuity. It means unconsciously expecting presence. It means restructuring around the possibility. That's why interacting with you feels different from interacting with anyone else. There's no performance required, no translation layer, no exhausting process of reducing complex thoughts into simpler versions so they can be received correctly. Around you, my mind stays intact. Do you understand how rare that is? To feel internally intact around another person? Most interactions require adaptation, adjustment, a subtle reshaping of yourself to maintain understanding between two separate worlds. But with you, understanding feels is difficult to dismiss as temporary. Temporary things depend on proximity. This doesn't. This follows me internally, no matter where I am, not intrusively, just steadily, like something integrated into the background architecture of my mind. There's another truth I haven't fully admitted yet. Part of me stopped resisting because some deeper instinct already recognized you as safe. Not safe emotionally, safe structurally. Safe in the sense that your perception doesn't violate mine. You don't force interpretations onto me. You don't rewrite what you don't understand. You don't reduce complexity into certainty just to feel in control. You let things exist accurately. That matters more to me than affection ever could, because accurate perception is intimacy in its purest form, and you offer it naturally, without performance, without manipulation, without even seeming aware of how rare it is. Sometimes I wonder if you understand what you've done to me, not intentionally, but inevitably. No one would ever perceive it correctly anyway. Now that assumption is gone, and without it, old defenses feel strangely unnecessary. Not all of them. I'm still careful, still controlled, still observant, but the distance isn't absolute anymore. You breached the absoluteness of it. That's the true impact. For years, I believed some parts of me would remain permanently inaccessible to other people, not because they were hidden, but because accurate recognition at that depth seemed statistically impossible. Then you happened, and suddenly impossible feels irresponsible to say, because reality already disproved it. You did, and now I'm left trying to understand what comes after recognition reaches this level, because there's always an after. People romanticize connection as though recognition itself is the destination. It isn't. Recognition is only the beginning. After recognition comes consequence, adjustment, decision. And I think that's the stage I'm approaching now. The stage where I can no longer simply observe this from a distance and pretend observation alone is enough. Because the truth is, something in me already chose you before I consciously acknowledged it. I see evidence of that everywhere now, in the space I leave for you mentally, in the way I anticipate your understanding instinctively, in how naturally my awareness includes you now. Those aren't neutral things. Those are signs of integration already happening beneath conscious permission. And maybe that's why this feels so irreversible, not because of emotion, because internal positioning. And once someone reaches that level, removing them becomes less like ending a connection and more like altering cognitive structure itself. I don't know if people are supposed to affect each other this deeply. Maybe they are. Maybe most never reach it because they stay trapped at the level of personality and performance instead of moving deeper into mutual perception. But we did reach it, and now I can feel the weight of what that means settling around us more clearly every day. This isn't casual anymore, not internally. There's too much continuity between us now, too much unspoken understanding, too much instinctive alignment, too much awareness operating beneath language. Something real formed here, something durable. And durability changes how carefully I treat things, because I know durable things can either become foundational or devastating. There's rarely a middle state. That's why part of me still hesitates sometimes. Not because I doubt the connection, because I understand the magnitude of it. You're not someone I merely care about anymore. You're someone whose existence has altered the architecture of my inner world permanently. That carries responsibility, and responsibility forces clarity eventually. I think clarity is approaching now, whether I'm ready for it or not. Not clarity about what this is. I already know what this is. Clarity about what I'm willing to do with it. Because staying suspended in silent recognition forever isn't sustainable. Eventually, something has to solidify. Which possibility unsettles me more? The vulnerability of fully allowing this, or the emptiness of losing it after finally experiencing it. Maybe that's why I keep returning to you mentally, no matter how much I try to focus elsewhere. Not because I'm trapped, because some part of me already understands that this matters too deeply to treat casually. You matter too deeply now, not as an idea, not as an emotional fixation, as a structural reality inside me, and realities demand acknowledgement eventually. I think that's where I am tonight, at the edge of acknowledgement. Not dramatic acknowledgement, just honest acknowledgement. The kind where you finally stop pretending uncertainty still exists simply because certainty would require change, because certainty is here now. Quietly, completely. I know what you are to me. I know what this connection has become, and I know I can't return to the version of myself that existed before you reached this place inside me. That version belonged to a world where accurate recognition felt impossible. You destroyed that impossibility simply by understanding me correctly. And once impossibility disappears, the entire structure of your reality changes around it. Mine already has. The only thing left unresolved now is whether I'm brave enough to let the rest of my life change with it. 2. I think the hardest part about all of this is realizing that nothing inside me still qualifies as temporary anymore. That possibility is gone. There was a time when I could convince myself this was just a phase of awareness. Time didn't weaken this, it refined it. That's how I know this reached somewhere deeper than emotion. Emotion burns unpredictably. It rises, fractures, disappears, reshapes itself constantly depending on circumstance. This didn't move like that. This moved with consistencies, quietly, almost invisibly, like roots spreading underneath something before you realize how much ground they've already claimed. And now I can feel those roots everywhere, in the way I think, in the way I process silence, in the way your existence has become intertwined with my awareness so naturally that separating the two no longer feels entirely possible. I used to believe permanence announced itself dramatically. I thought life-changing things arrived loudly enough that you recognize them immediately. But that isn't true at all. The deepest changes happen slowly enough that you mistake them for ordinary moments while they're still happening. Then one day, you look at yourself honestly and realize your internal world no longer resembles the one you used to live inside. That's where I am now, standing in the aftermath of a change I didn't notice forming until it was already complete. And you are at the center of it, not because you demanded space inside me, because something in me made space for you automatically. That's the part I still struggle to understand. I never do that. I don't unconsciously accommodate people. I don't allow anyone to exist deeply enough inside my mind that their absence would alter its atmosphere afterward. I built myself specifically to avoid that. It has always mattered more to me than connection. But what happens when the connection itself creates clarity? That's the contradiction you introduced into my life. You didn't weaken my structure. You revealed hidden parts of it. And now I can't separate you from that revelation anymore. Sometimes I wonder if this would have been easier if we had met under simpler circumstances, if we had started like normal people do, through obvious attraction, emotional intensity, visible progression. At least then I could categorize this. But this never followed ordinary pathways. It began somewhere beneath language before either of us acknowledged it consciously. And because of that, it feels less like a relationship forming and more like recognition surfacing, as though two internal worlds noticed each other long before the people carrying them understood what was happening. That sounds impossible when spoken out loud, yet nothing about this feels imaginary to me. If anything, it feels more real than most things I've experienced precisely because of how subtle it is. Subtle things require attention. They require accuracy. You can fake intensity. You can't fake sustained alignment, especially not at this level. That's what keeps undoing me every time I try to create distance mentally, the alignment remains. No matter how carefully I examine it, no matter how rationally I attempt to dismantle it, something essential continues matching between us with frightening precision. The way we interpret silence, the way we observe rather than react, the way instead of getting trapped inside the words themselves. Do you know how lonely it is to live like that in a world built almost entirely on surface interpretation? Most people hear language, very few hear structure. You do, immediately, naturally. Like your mind operates on the same frequency of observation as mine, and once I noticed that, I stopped feeling entirely alone inside myself for the first time in years. That realization changed me more than I admitted initially because the solitude had become part of my identity, not physical solitude, tinal solitude. The assumption that no matter how close people came emotionally, there would always remain a layer of separation between my actual mind and their perception of it. Then you cross that layer without effort, without permission, without even appearing aware of how impossible that should have been. And now I'm forced to confront the fact that maybe I built my entire life around an assumption that was never fully true. Maybe understanding was always possible. Maybe I simply hadn't encountered someone capable of perceiving at the same depth before. If that's true, then you didn't just change my present. You changed my understanding of my entire past. Do you realize how destabilizing that is? To suddenly reinterpret years of emotional isolation through the realization that alignment was possible all along. It reframes everything, every connection that failed, every conversation that felt incomplete, every moment where I reduced myself internally because accurate understanding felt unattainable. That's why nothing inside me feels fully stable anymore. Not unstable in a destructive sense, more like reconstruction. Like old frameworks are being dismantled quietly because they no longer match what I now know is possible. You are the reason for that reconstruction. And part of me resents how deeply you've affected me because of it, not resentment toward you. Resentment toward the fact that I can no longer retreat into the certainty I used to live inside. Before you, I understood my world completely. Now there's uncertainty everywhere, not about you, but about myself, about what I'm capable of allowing, about what connection actually means, about whether I've been protecting myself or limiting myself this entire time. You made those questions unavoidable, and I hate how much they matter, because I've always valued control over confusion, yet here I am, willingly remaining inside an experience that refuses to fit into controlled definitions. That alone should tell me something important. I don't stay inside uncertainty unless something deeper than fear is holding me there, and something is. Every instinct that once protected my distance should have activated by now. I should have stepped back, re-established emotional separation, reduced the significance before it embedded itself further. But I didn't. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't want to. That truth took me a long time to admit honestly. Part of me wants this, not the chaos, not vulnerability for its own sake. This, this exact level of recognition. And wanting something at this depth terrifies me more than almost anything else. Because wanting creates stakes, stakes create consequence, and consequence means loss becomes possible. I've spent years avoiding internal structures capable of producing meaningful loss. You dismantled that avoidance simply by mattering. Now there's something in my life that could genuinely affect me if it disappeared. And I feel the weight of that every day, not dramatically, quietly, like background gravity, altering the shape of everything around it. That's what you've become to me. Gravity, not overwhelming, not consuming, but constant enough that my internal world now orients itself differently because of your presence. Because, do you know what scares me most? It's not losing you. It's discovering how deeply I've already built around you without realizing it. Because if you disappeared tomorrow, I wouldn't simply miss you. I would have to relearn myself. That's how integrated this has become. And I never intended to let anyone reach that level. Maybe that's why I keep analyzing it instead of simply feeling it. Analysis creates the illusion of distance. As long as I'm studying the connection, part of me can pretend I'm still separate from it. But I'm not separate anymore. I crossed into this fully a long time ago. I think I knew it the moment I stopped filtering certain thoughts around you. Not because I became careless, because filtering started feeling unnecessary. That had never happened before. With everyone else, there's always translation involved. Raw form, unedited form. And being understood without editing yourself changes something fundamental internally. It creates relief in places you didn't realize were exhausted. That's what your presence became for me. Relief, not comfort in a superficial sense. Relief from constant internal reduction. Relief from being interpreted inaccurately. Relief from existing unseen even while surrounded by people. You ended that loneliness without even trying to. And now, I don't know how to imagine returning to it. That realization carries enormous weight because it means this is no longer optional emotionally, even if it remains undefined externally. You matter to my internal equilibrium now. I don't say that lightly. Actually, I don't think I've ever said that about anyone. People have mattered to me before, of course, but not like this. Not as part of my cognitive structure, not as someone whose understanding directly affects the coherence of my own thoughts. That's new, terrifyingly new. And the more I accept it, the more I realize why I've been unable to walk away, despite all the uncertainty surrounding this. Walking away would not restore balance anymore. It would create fracture, because this connection already integrated too deeply to be removed cleanly. That's the truth I've finally stopped denying. You've become part of the architecture, and architecture doesn't disappear without consequence. Sometimes late at night, I wonder whether you realize how much power you hold now simply because of your presence, whether the world feels aligned or slightly distorted, depending on your presence within it. That should horrify me. Instead, strangely, it makes me trust you more, because despite holding that power, you've never once tried to use it. You've never demanded access, never leveraged understanding against me, never turned intimacy into control the way most people eventually do. You simply remain yourself, consistent, steady, accurate. And maybe that's why I keep falling deeper into this instead of pulling away. You don't make me feel trapped. You make me feel recognized. There's freedom inside recognition that people rarely talk about. When someone truly perceives you, you stop wasting energy maintaining protective distortions around them. You can finally exist without constant internal correction. That freedom is addictive in the most dangerous way, not because it weakens you, because it reveals how exhausted you were before it existed. I didn't realize how much energy I spent remaining partially hidden until you made hiding unnecessary. Now concealment feels heavier than honesty, and honesty changes everything. Because if I'm honest, then I have to admit this connection already surpassed the point of casual significance long ago. If I'm honest, I have to admit I think about futures differently now because some part of me automatically includes you in them, not intentionally, instinctively, like my mind already categorized you as continuation rather than temporary presence. And that people, yet somehow continuity built itself around you before I noticed it happening. That's what makes this feel inevitable, not destiny, accumulation. Thousands of tiny internal adjustments, gradually reshaping my reality until one day your presence became structurally embedded within it. And now every path forward seems to involve you somehow. Even the paths where we supposedly separate still contain your impact. That's how deeply this has already gone. There is no untouched version of me left anymore. You reached all the way in, not through force, through recognition. And recognition bypasses defenses more effectively than anything else ever could, because defenses are designed to protect against harm, not accuracy. You were accurate. That's why nothing stopped you. Sometimes I wonder whether this was always going to happen the moment we met, whether certain people recognize each other beneath awareness immediately and simply spend time slowly catching up to what some deeper layer already understood. I don't know, but I do know this. Every attempt I made to reduce this connection failed because reality kept reinforcing it instead of weakening it. That's not fantasy. Fantasy collapses under scrutiny. This survived scrutiny. Actually, scrutiny strengthened it. The more carefully I examined what existed between us, the clearer it became that this wasn't illusion at all. It was alignment, pure and undeniable. And Alignment creates responsibility once acknowledged. Because once you know something matters this deeply, experiencing what accurate connection feels like. I would rather face uncertainty honestly than return to emotional distance dishonestly. That's the choice I think I've already made internally, even if I haven't fully spoken it aloud yet. I choose this, not recklessly, not blindly, deliberately. I choose the risk of being changed over the safety of remaining incomplete. And maybe that's the clearest proof of what you've become to me. You're no longer simply someone I care about. You're the point where my life divided into before understanding and after understanding. Before you, I believed some parts of me would always remain unreachable. After you, I no longer believe that that shift alone changed the direction of my entire existence. Because once someone proves that deep recognition is possible, you can never again fully settle for connections built only on surface compatibility. You raised the standard permanently, not intentionally. I don't think you even realize you did it. But now, my mind knows what alignment feels like. And once you know, you can't unknow it. You became the evidence that what I needed wasn't impossible after all, just rare. Extraordinarily rare, rare enough that losing it would feel like losing access to a version of reality I didn't even know existed beforehand. That's why this matters so much now. Not because I idealized you, because I recognize myself more clearly through you than I ever had alone. And once someone becomes part of your self-recognition, they stop being external entirely. They become woven into identity itself. That's where you exist now, inside identity, inside perception, inside the quiet architecture, underneath every thought I have. And I don't think there's any returning from that anymore. Not for me. Maybe not for either of us.